Hi everyone, and welcome to How Good's Footy in Asia, AFL Asia's official podcast. I'm your co-host Matty Gale over in Osaka, Japan, and it gives me great pleasure this afternoon to introduce one of AFL Asia's favourite sons. He's AFL Asia royalty in Rick Olarenshaw. Before we get to Rick, let's just go through some of Rick's involvement with footy. It's been an outstanding involvement over an extended period of 30 years just in the professional level and post that over in Asia. So Rick played 83 AFL games from memory with three clubs, which is the Essendon Football Club, North Melbourne and Collingwood. Collingwood before North Melbourne, eventually got to North Melbourne. I played in the 1993 Premiership with the Essendon Baby Bombers, and he's since moved over to Bali, and geez, hasn't he taken the AFL Asia scene by storm, winning back-to-back Division 2 Asian champs with the Bali Geckos in 2016-17 and going straight to the top of the tree with the Division 1 champions with the Indonesian Volcanoes in 2018. It's a long list of achievements, Rick, and we certainly wish and thank you for coming on board. And how's things over your way in Bali?
Thanks for the intro, mate. It's been a real privilege to be part of AFL Asia since moving to Bali, which I'm in Bali now. And yeah, we've had a pretty quiet couple of years, which has in some respects been quite enjoyable at time. Uncrowded surf and no traffic, and we had a pretty good time during COVID. But obviously, economically, it was tough for a lot of people. And now it's really bubbling. I can't believe how quickly Bali's come alive. And our footy club, Bali Geckos, I thought COVID could have been the death of us. We were a strong club leading into COVID, and then COVID hit, and a lot of people had to leave the island. People lost their jobs, had to move back to their home ports. Like the Indonesians had to go back to their villages. So we thought the pandemic might have been the killer of the club, but if anything, we've probably got stronger. And Bali's coming alive again, and we're starting to people coming down on holidays and training. We've actually got Paul Williams coming down tonight. He has been heavily involved with the Geckos for a few years now. Played in Vietnam and
that's right.
Made a bit of a comeback and played over there. So he's coming to train tonight. So good to have him back down. And we had Courtney Dempsey down last week. So we're starting to get a few of the AFL boys now starting to come through and training with us again, which is great. We haven't seen them for 3 years, but they're all starting to flow through again.
Yeah, Courtney Dempsey, obviously a former Essendon player as well. Bill, I'm going to get you to come in with the new rock from the northern end, given that Saigon's above Bali.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you mentioned that John De Goey didn't pop in on the pre-finals bye weekend, did he?
Did forget about that one, yeah. He popped up on his bye weekend, which I was a bit of a surprise to see an AFL player in Bali on his bye weekend. But we were stoked to have him. He came down to footy training. He was so enthusiastic. It was great. He took photos with everyone. He had a kick around, and it was great to have. And obviously, he went out that night and got videoed, and the rest was all over the papers for weeks. Whether he was hard done by, I'm not going to share that opinion, but it's just great to see a bloke who's still playing AFL wants to come out and have a kick with the Geckos on a Wednesday evening, wet Wednesday evening too.
And regardless of where you stand on that, it's great to see him absolutely primed for a massive final series as well. So I think he's put a lot of it behind him, and
well, if he has a big one, mate, we'll take credit for that. Well, takes the Magpies for a premiership. They might get a few players coming over.
Yeah. So to get stuck into it, aside from all the AFL guys dropping through, the Geckos and the Bintangs have been busy. You're actually fresh off the plane from a trip to KL. How did that tour go?
Well, it's awesome to be touring again. One of the reasons we play for the Bali Geckos is we had to go away pretty much every month to play footy, and we obviously haven't done that. We've been to Jakarta a couple of times. The only games we can get during COVID was domestic games. So it's good to actually go on an international tour, and Malaysia were a great host. They put on a really good weekend. Yeah. It was the first time our women's team have actually had a proper match, and the first time they've toured. Well, they were formed before COVID, but they didn't get any games up and running before COVID hit, and then weren't able to play any games throughout COVID. So they were pretty excited to actually play in another country. They joined up. Our Bali girls joined up with our Jakarta girls and played the Malaysian girls who were reigning Asian champs, and they taught them a bit of a lesson. Actually, our girls did actually score, but they had a crack and they really enjoyed it. It was just good to get away and tour again. That's one of the reasons we play footy. I just love the camaraderie and the banter of travelling, and and meeting guys from the other teams. And, our men's team had a really good win. And we had a really good night with the Warriors that evening.
Yep. So one of the themes, I think, across Asia is that sort of rediscovering what we loved about Asian footy. We just hosted Singapore last weekend, which was, again, outstanding. And we've already been on a bus across to Cambodia for a couple of games. So the big one, I guess, on everybody's radar now is getting together for a champs for the first time since 2019. Getting that one tour under your belt, how do you think Indonesia are looking for the champs?
I think our men's team looks really good. Obviously, we had a big win on the weekend against the Warriors, and half that team was made up of Indonesian players, not just our star expat players. Everyone talks about Jack Ahern and Bryce Critch, these sort of guys, Matt Jolly, Kalen.
Yep.
Half our team was made up of Indonesian boys, so it shows that our junior program and our Indonesian program in Bali and Jakarta is really working. To have half your team made up of local Indonesian players and having a 100-point win shows we've got some really good talent coming through. So in terms of the Asian chance, we feel we might be able to chance to field 3 teams for the first time.
Wow.
A, B, and C grade, with a number of expat players who are coming through, and not just expat Australian players. We've got men and women from all over the world playing AFL now, and our women's squad's obviously got stronger. So for the first time, we'll have probably 3 men's teams and a women's team at the Asian Chair. So we're pretty excited. There's still a few issues travelling still. That's why our women's team on the weekend probably got flogged, because a number of our key girls couldn't go for a number of reasons, like vaccinations and work visas. They couldn't leave the country or didn't have their passport back from the immigration office. So I'm sure that will pose some problems even in October going to Bangkok. So we don't know at this stage what squad we'll have for that. But I feel like we've got a really good chance with the men. We obviously won in 18. Our performances in 2019 were pretty poor. I think being in Pattaya, some of the boys got sidetracked on the Friday night. So we weren't as well prepared on the Saturday as we should have been. And I think they'll learn from that. And I think our women, from what I've seen of our group of women, I think we'll do really well. And we're really excited, obviously, to travel and play in the champs once again.
Absolutely.
Brilliant, Rick. Great summary of all things happening there with the Bali Geckos and footy in Indonesia in general. And it'd be unbelievable if you get 4 teams there, 3 men's division and 1 women's as well. One of the stories that's been in the spotlight, not just in the AFL, but more broadly right across society, has been Dani Laylee, who was part of your coaching team. You're obviously a player coach, but Dani Laylee was one of your key figures off the field in a coaching capacity back in 2018. But very publicly now, all of this has come to light, and she's been an absolute excellent example of people that are facing these issues with their sexuality and their gender experiences and what they're going through. Have you spoken to Dani, and how do you feel about the whole situation and her progression from where she's hit rock bottom to where she is now?
She got heavily involved with the Geckos when she bought a villa here in Bali and was spending more time here. So was taking night to training, which is not just great for our players, but good for me as a coach to learn from. And then she came across to KL and was my, I guess, assistant coach when we won the champs. And I've had some correspondence with Danielle, but I haven't put her under any pressure to reconnect with the Geckos as yet. I'm hoping in due course she might start to reconnected with the Kangaroos and the Eagles and former clubs. But at some point, I'd love her to come over here and get back involved with the Geckos in some capacity. But with everything going on in life at the moment, I watched the 60 Minutes show the other night. Again, I only know part of the story. And it was, it's amazing what's transpired, and you really admire her, watch the courage she's shown, and leading the way with so many other people who are coming through, particularly playing football, whether they're man, woman, and having issues with identity. I just think it's going to change the whole landscape for a whole range of people, especially in a sport that's in the past and has a history of being so male dominated and probably politically incorrect in a lot of ways. And even now, I probably have to check what I say. What I used to say to the players even 5 years ago, you've got to really check what you say now, whether it's to the players or to, even on our WhatsApp groups. You've got to be so careful now how you convey messages. And even on the weekend, I gave the players a pretty good spray at half time. I felt Malaysia got a bit of momentum back in the second quarter, and I gave our players a fair dinkum spray, which I'm quite known to do. And I forgot that there was women sitting in watching our halftime huddle. I completely forgot they were there. No, the boys were out back on the ground. There's the girls are sitting there horrified of the language that came out of my mouth. So they're all the sort of things you sort of got to start to realise now that what you could do and say 5 years ago and how you can treat people. And you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with people. I never knew what Danielle was going through, even though I'd heard rumours, and I was never close enough to Danielle to ask her those direct questions a few years ago, that you don't know what is going on behind closed doors, and you just got to be, I guess, just embrace as much as you can.
Yeah, well said, Rick. Excellent. Let's move along to the Bombers. They're looking for a coach, Rick, just before we touch on the 93 Premiership. Your record, I've worked it out, it's about 92.5% win-loss record. You've got more runs on the board than anyone that's going around besides probably Ross Lyon. But let's move on. We won't take the piss too much, but it'd be great to...
Maybe I guess use my agent, mate. Maybe you send my CV into the... Well, David Campbell's the CEO of Essendon, ex-CEO David Campbell's a good mate of mine, and maybe I might have got a look in the door with him still there, but he's now gone. Yep. I did mention on our 93 group chat that I should throw my hat in the ring with my AFL Asian coaching record, but that didn't seem to really take me seriously. But who wanted to move back to Melbourne anyway? I'm living a great lifestyle in Bali. I've been surfing all day today. Why would I want to be back in a cold, windswept Tullamarine?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We just spoke to you off air a while ago, just some messages here and there, and you had to clean the zinc off your nose because you'd just been for a surf for the first time in a couple of months after an injury. So you don't get that living in Melbourne any time of the year to relax at that point.
Yeah, well, let's go to the zinc. I didn't realise there was going to be a video podcast. I'm Facebook getting out to surf. Yeah, I actually tore my hamstring at the Masters. We had obviously we hadn't played Bali Masters for a number of years, and we had our first back into it this year. We had about 20 odd teams come over, which was great. Normally we get about 50, but we got about 20 come in, and I tore my hamstring late on the second day. Got through 11 games, but couldn't quite get through the last couple of minutes, and then a month later I tore my hamstring again surfing. So I've been out of the water and off the footy ground for a couple of months now, but I'm doing my rehab so I can get ready for the Asian Champs. Probably Gailey, probably C grade for me this year, I think. C grade, maybe a bit of bench and B grade.
So there you go. There's nothing like that number 47, silky smooth left foot. Let's go to the Bombers Premiership in 93. You'd played under 19s, I think, in 91, reserves in 92, part of the Baby Bombers Brigade and the Premiership team in 93. Look, I idolised the Bombers before the Crows came in, so I've always had a soft spot for the Bombers, and I rode that Premiership, even though the Crows were playing the Bombers in that second, I think it was the second semi-final, which we were up by 42 points.
Yeah,
that Premiership, that Premiership and playing under Sheeds, just give us some really thorough insight into how that year went and how much it means to you. Obviously, you've got a 30-year reunion next year, which is huge. Yep. And I know these Premiership reunions, they seem like, it's only 5 years and 10 years, and all of a sudden it's 30. It's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it doesn't seem like 30 years ago it happened, to be honest. It's so vivid now. The memories of 93 and the grand final and getting a Premiership medal and all the activities that happened afterwards are still so vivid. I can't believe it's that long ago. And I remember Sheeds saying to us before the game that your career will go like that. That's what he used to say. Your career's going to go like that. And when you're a 20-year-old guy and you're playing in finals, you think your career's going to last forever. But it's amazing how spot on Sheeds was. And even you guys, your footy career just seems to go past in the blink of an eye. And so does your footy career. And, I was lucky I got to play in the Premiership early, and you probably think you're probably playing more. But I guess I was just in the right place at the right time. We had a good team at that point. I guess the other thing too, we came through, a group of us came through the under-19s together, and then came through the reserves together and played in a reserves flag in 92 under Dennis Pagan. And then we moved into the senior team together. So that's 6 or 7 guys, they call it Baby Bombers, that played, probably 4 years of footy together, and a few of us had played Essendon District League, for 10 years prior to that. But we also had a really strong core of senior players that very experienced, very strong, and we just built up a lot of belief in our team throughout the year. Pretty like probably Collingwood have this year. They just kept winning, even when they were out of the game and you think they're going to lose. They somehow found a way to win, and that's how we felt in '93. We didn't feel like any time in a game that we were no chance to win, and I think that prelim against the Crows when we were 43 points down at half time, we still genuinely believe we could win. And you build up that belief and that faith with your teammates and trust throughout the course of the year. So most of the teams that have a chance this year, Sydney, Collingwood, they've really built that strong trust and won some really tough games. And that's going to hold you in really good stead come finals time.
Yeah, we'll get into those finals a little bit later on in the podcast. We'll briefly go through them because we're more interested in finding out what's going on in Rick Olarenshaw. So, Rick, I'm going to go.
Sheed's obviously an unbelievable coach, and I've taken on board a lot of things Sheed's has done for us as a coach. There's a few things I've probably parked that I wasn't a fan of, but he's a very unique guy, Sheed's, and I learned a hell of a lot, both from football and off the field. So. Really interesting time, and I'm very lucky to have that time at Essendon during the 90s.
Yeah, once that flag finished off, Rick, you end up moving to Collingwood and the Kangaroos in the final 3 years of your 8-year career. Just wanted to find out, I know Essendon was a club that was happy to let players go to move on to other opportunities. How did the moves to Collingwood and afterwards to the Kangaroos? I think you only played half a dozen games between the two clubs over the 3 years. Obviously, injuries put a big stamp on your time at both clubs. But was it a stage? I remember back in the mid to late 90s, there was players that wanted to move clubs. Nathan Buckley was probably the most highly prolific player that wanted to sort of change clubs, and Brett Chalmers got a $50,000 or a $20,000 fine for wanting to change clubs. Were you somewhat hamstrung trying to move from Essendon to Collingwood and eventually to North Melbourne? Can you let us know how it all played out?
Yeah, I guess you start off as a young bloke wanting to be a one-club player. But you get to times in your career where you feel like you're not getting the opportunities that you want. You might not be playing enough midfield time or things like that. For me, that was probably what it was. I was out of contract. Essendon had salary cap issues. I felt that I wasn't getting enough midfield time that I was hoping for. And I wanted to go and play for North Melbourne. That's what I wanted to go to. That was my first choice. But trading back then was, could be quite difficult, particularly when Sheeds and Pagan didn't have a great relationship. So I didn't end up getting to North, obviously, and I went to Collingwood. And I think I would have been 24, 25 at the time. And then I pretty much missed 2 years of injury. I had 1 year under Shaw and 1 year under Malthouse, but I pretty much, only played a handful of games because of some injuries. And then I thought I was done. I snapped my hamstring off at Collingwood, and the surgeon said I wouldn't play footy again, and I'd have my hamstring sewn back on. So I spent the whole of 2000 in the coach's box with Mick Malthouse, which was a pretty scary but amazing experience all in one. And I didn't think I'd play footy again. It wasn't until Dennis Pagan come knocking on my door. I actually started playing cricket again, and I got a call from Dennis that taught me out of retirement. That's how I ended up at the Kangaroos. And first game back, I tore my other hamstring off over in Adelaide against the Crows. So that was in 2001. So pretty much over a 3-year period, I played 6 games. And then once I tore that hamstring, I decided to retire. I never thought I'd play football again, to be honest. It wasn't until Greg Hinchcliffe, the Bali Geckos president, heard I'd moved to Bali about 10 years ago that he gave me a call and sent me a message on Facebook. And actually, it might have been MySpace back then because Hinchy probably hasn't even moved on to Facebook yet, to talk me into playing for the Geckos. And at that point, I had no interest about, playing football. I thought my football career was gone. And I didn't even think my body could even hold up to playing football. But I got the bug back, and I just love being involved again. I don't think, that 10 years or so out of football, I didn't realise how much I missed being part of a footy team and the banter and the camaraderie. And And that's once I got that back, it gave me the bug to get back involved and also get my body right so I can still play.
Yeah, I'm going to get off skew a little bit, just on a different football related matter, and you might not even have an opinion about it. We'll get into your post career as well shortly, but one of the hot topics in Adelaide with the SANFL at the moment is the Adelaide Crows and Port Adelaide Magpies are still in the SANFL. There's always this old school mentality that the Crows shouldn't be in, and the Port Adelaide Magpies is basically the reserves. And it has become a development league. I think from the time I spent in the SANFL when I first entered, it became players would play out their career in the reserves like they did in the AFL, and then it became a development league and a breeding ground for the AFL clubs. One thing that's happened is, I think pre-COVID, there was pretty big discussions as to whether there would be an AFL Reserves competition. Now, that AFL Reserves competition in its current or its old phase was involved all the Melbourne-based clubs and I think the Sydney Swans. So we've had the NEFL, which included NT Thunder there for a while. Now they've got this VFL. I think the first COVID or the second 2021 was when they revamped. They had 21 teams. Now they've got 18, and it's all over the shop. There's still the standalone old VAFA clubs as well. Would you like to see an AFL Resi's comp come back, just so you can, I guess you can streamline players that are not drafted within your club? You can have a supplementary list as such. I think it would extend the pathway system. I like how the Victoria's got their underage system set up. And I don't think you'd officially go back to zona like you would have had a key law with the Essendon Football League. But what do you think about the AFL Resis? Do you reckon it'll get up again?
Oh, it's, as you said, I'm not sure I've got an opinion, to be honest, Gail. I've been in Bali for 10 years. I don't even know what happens below the AFL. I really don't fully understand the pathway now with the 18s and the VFL. But I did enjoy playing Essendon reserves, coming through the 19s and reserves. I really enjoyed that pathway. And again, I don't know what budget restrictions there are to do that, but for me personally, I found that a really good pathway to learn my craft in the 19s and play good footy with the carrot of getting promoted up to the reserves, and that's a big thrill to get to play reserves, getting promoted and play with some current AFL players who might not be in the senior side. I remember playing alongside Tim Watson in my first year of Resis, and I couldn't believe I was running out beside him. So there's some benefits to that, and then you get, if you can play some good Resis footy, you know that, the next week you could be picked in the AFL team. There's that carrot as well. So I really like that pathway, and whether they can ever get back to that, I'm not quite sure, Gailey. It's a really hard one for me to say here in Bali, because I don't really look at much underneath what goes on in the AFL, unless it's AFL
footy
Asia,
nerd.
Of course.
Yeah, that's probably the footy nerd coming out of me. I'll hand the baton back over to Bill. Bill, off to you, please.
Yep, I know that. Just funnily, it's funny to hear you talk about that pathway stuff. But another Volcanoes player, Dane Swan, talks about playing for the Collingwood reserves, and now that he's gone on to be a Brownlow medalist and Premiership player, there's about 100,000 people he's met since then who swear that they used to go and watch him play reserves at like 10 a.m. at 6-degree days. And he's like, that's funny because I didn't see anybody there when I was actually playing, but it turns out everybody was there. But yeah, the pathways is I still think one of the best things about footy. So moving on to your post-AFL career, and I remember we touched on this in the Swannies podcast when we did it as well, and it was some of my favourite responses. But I'd stumbled across in my research for that a ranking of the top 10 ever boundary riders in which you featured, and we brought that up. But you did go on to become I guess it was Channel 7 at the time, but you're a boundary rider. Can you tell us about how that sort of came about and some of your experiences in that?
Well, I guess post football, I got into play management. I was working in sports marketing, managing footballers and cricketers, and at the time, Channel 7 got the TV rights for the football, and I went in there to see Ian Johnson to try and push some of my talent that I had in my books. And he said, the one thing we do need is a bloke who's played football, but also has got a medical degree. And I had a physiotherapy degree. I worked as a physio during my AFL days. And I said, well, mate, I've got both of those. I've got the footy and the physio. And he said, mate, would you do it? I said, yeah, I'll do it. He called me in for a casting, and I completely screwed it up, and thought that's probably the last time Channel 7 will call me. And then 6 months later, they rang and said, "Mate, you're on this Friday night. You need to get your wardrobe sorted out." I'm like, "Do I get some training?" I said, "Nah, mate, you're in front of the camera on Friday night." I had to work with Bruce McAvaney and Dennis Cometti, and I've never been so nervous in all my life because I'd done no preparation. If you play AFL, you spent 20 years preparing for your first game. Whereas I had 4 days and no time in front of the microphone to get in front of the TV, knowing there was a million people watching. So it was pretty, it was a pretty scary moment. And I worked with Channel 7, I think, for about 5 years until they sacked me when Richo came along. And I had a really good time covering the footy. And I know the front bar always used me twice a year with one of my stuff ups. So I can't believe they haven't asked me to come on, and they keep using my stuff up twice a year. They should get me on the show. So it was a good time. I did some radio as well with Gold FM. So I spent a few years in the media, but the lure of surfing in Bali became too much for me, and that's why I decided to come here.
So I'll get to Bali in a minute. Actually, you also just touched on the, I think athlete management as opposed to player management is. Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the athletes that you were managing at that time and how that all went?
Yeah, well, I actually moved to London when I finished football. I moved over there. I was good friends with Matthew Elliott, the ex-cricketer, and we did physiotherapy together. And he was managed by a cricket company in London. So he put me forward for a job, which I got, and I moved to London. And I only lasted 6 weeks. I couldn't stand living in London. It was too cold and it was too gloomy. So I decided to move back to Melbourne. I started the Australian office of that company. And that's how I got involved with sports marketing and in particular player management. And I didn't really have a plan to do football. I was going to stick to doing cricket. And that's when cricket was starting to get heavily involved with the IPL and money was starting to come into the game. So my focus was cricket, but I had some players that were still in the AFL who were asking me to manage them. Because they weren't happy with their manager or had a good relationship with me already. So I started managing footballers. And pretty much the first guy I signed up was Adam Cooney, whose dad was here recently and I caught up with, and we had a bit of a laugh about the first night I knocked on Adam's door and had a beer with Paul and couldn't drive my hire car home. So Adam was one of the first guys I signed, and Adam and I still got a great relationship. And so that's how I sort of got involved with football management. I ended up managing guys like Ikanas and Brendan Favola and some fairly high profile players. Brian Lake, who I dragged over to Japan with me, Gailey, you might probably remember that trip. I looked after Brian's affairs when he was a player, and he was always a fairly colourful guy to manage and probably even more colourful guy to go on tour with. He hasn't toured with us again, Gailey, so not sure we'll ever get him back in a Geckos Guernsey.
I've had him in a super coach league this year, Brian. So just for a mutual bloke that I played in a premiership with, I think he's actually with his partner is actually the guy that I play with is his son. So there's a bit of connection with the three of them. It was a magnificent tour. Besides picking up all the mess afterwards once you guys took off, but that's a story for another podcast.
I remember even when Brian was in Bali one time, we had a Victoria versus the rest of the world game. And I remember I had like Nathan Jones playing for Victoria, who was still playing AFL at the time. And Brian actually crashed his motorbike on the way to the game and then got taken to hospital, got stitched up and bandaged up and came back and came on after half time. They still had a run with him. So that's commitment for you.
Unbelievable.
So you did then mention that the pool of Bali got a little bit too strong, and a lot of those sporting / AFL related career ambitions moved to. So how did it actually come about, and what were your initial, I guess? I think a lot of us have probably experienced this, where you go somewhere for a certain amount of time, and then one day it dawns on you like, this isn't going to be the constrained time that I set for it. How did that all come about for you in terms of heading to Bali and then ending up there? And Are you a lifer now, or are there plans to move elsewhere, or where do you?
Yeah, when I first moved here, so what happened is our business got bought out, and I decided not to join the company that took us over, and I took a 12-month package where I couldn't work for 12 months in that sports marketing field. So I thought I might as well just come and surf and spend some time in Bali. And it was probably the first time in my life that I never had any plans. I just had a clean whiteboard. I'd always, at school was trying to get into university or trying to make it in the AFL. And I never had a time in my life where I just took a deep breath and thought, okay, let's see what's ahead without any plan. And I came here, I surfed. I thought maybe Bali's just good for a holiday, not for a place to live. And I spent a few months here and just fell in love with the place and decided to stay. So now I've got Balinese wife. You can see there's our wedding picture up there, me dressed up in my little Balinese outfit. I've got the makeup on and the Balinese kit. 2 kids who both get involved with the footy club. So, for me right now, life's here. My kids are at school here. I've got businesses here, and I'm still playing footy here. I can't see myself playing footy in cold Melbourne winter. I think having the warm weather helps the body, and just loving life being based here in Bali.
Brilliant. Are you going to stay there for life, or you're not 100% certain?
Oh, I've got no plans to go anywhere just as yet, mate. No, pretty settled here. But now that the traffic's getting busy again and the surf's getting a bit more crowded, I might have to maybe think about where my next spot might be. But right now, mate, I'm just loving being in Bali. I love being involved in the footy club. My kids are really happy here. I think the wife wants another one. Just got to be careful at night times. Life is here.
Terrific. Great to hear. Let's move along to the footy now. I really remember my first Asian Champs I think I went to was 2013, and Bali was an absolute basket case. They're really scratching for numbers, and there wasn't much happening. It was Hinchy just grabbing players and trying to field a team. So we happened to play against Bali, and it just happened to be the game where we got all these ring-ins from all the players that were sort of wanted to double up in a game. And they beat us, and they were coming dead last up until then. So things turned around. You've rocked up, and you've developed that club into a powerhouse on and off the field. Got AFL stars coming over here, there, and everywhere, even during the season sometimes. But it's been magnificent for the game to have a central figure like yourself, and bringing in stars of Wayne Carey's ilk and Dane Swan and such, and Paul Williams tonight. Let's go through the 3 Asian Champ victories. So 2016, that was played in Vietnam. I think you may have beaten Myanmar, or you may have beaten them. I know you beat Myanmar the first year. 2017, you beat the
Indochina.
Indochina, yeah. So that game, I did the boundary. I was out in the pocket, and it was lucky it was one-way traffic because you couldn't see the ground at all. So Vietnam should have actually played in that grand final, Bill. Yeah. But you capitulated against the Indochina Bulldogs in the semi. And then, of course, there was the Indonesian Volcanoes over there in Malaysia, defeating the Philippine Eagles, who were going in their 3rd grand final straight. So tremendous. One thing that I will say before we go through the Asian Champs titles individually is that Jakarta and Bali weren't always good friends. And you brought the 2 clubs have come together really, really well. These Indonesian Volcano tours have been magnificent. We've seen you come over to Osaka, and you've travelled here, there, and everywhere. But the close-knit club now, it's been really good for Indonesian football as well. So let us know about these Asian Champs titles if you can.
Yeah, I guess when I've rocked up to the Geckos, it must have been around about 2013, 2014. Yeah, you're right. We were a bit of a basket case. We had no players. I think the first time I came to training was about 4 or 5 players. We had a bit of goal kicking. That was about it. But we got a number of players who sort of moved over to Bali at a similar time, and all of a sudden we had 12 guys at training, and we loved our footy. So we just really got together and got some momentum going and build our team up. So you're right, with 2016 we beat Myanmar, 2017 Indochina. And at that point, Bali and Jakarta definitely had a pretty harsh rivalry. There was I can almost use the word hate, but I think that was a lot of it was a previous era. So, a lot of the pre-2013 Geckos had moved on. There was only a couple like Hinchy. And so I think a lot of the history was in an era gone by. So the players that were now playing for Bali and the ones for Jakarta probably weren't carrying as much baggage. And it wasn't an overnight thing. We did work on it together. We didn't try and force the two teams together. We just let it happen over time. And I guess Paul Halliday and Matt Jolly were drivers in that as well. Hinchy was probably very much a Bali Geckos guy, so he was a bit of pushback that he wanted to play in the same team as the Bintangs. But eventually we started going on a few tours together. And I think the first one we might have played Malaysia and KL for an Anzac Day game. And, it's like you have a good win and you have a few beers after the game and you realise that they're just like us. They're just good guys and they just want to play footy. So it was a bit of a gradual thing. But I think to start playing together at the Champs, it made sense because, we've got guys who are really good level players who can play A grade. And you've got those guys who are, a bit like us, go a bit over the hill, we're, struggling a bit. Or you got some guys who are new to the game, they're Indonesian boys, and they're not ready to play A grade. So it wasn't fair that Jakarta were getting smashed around in A grade with a few of the guys that couldn't even put on the field because they weren't ready. And we had guys, like Jack-Ahern, who were just too good for B grade. So it made sense for us to go as one country and get those guys who are A grade level to play A grade. And the guys who are getting old or developing can play B grade. And that's why this year we're really keen to have a C grade team made up of a lot of our Indonesian boys who might be their first or second year of playing, or we've got some guys who have crossed codes or from another country and still can't even handball properly yet, So for us, it was more about it gives the players a better opportunity to play at their level. And now that we tour together, we just feel like we've won the same. And now Matt Jolly, who's been a long-time coach of Jakarta Bintangs, now lives in Bali. And, he's at our training every Wednesday. He even takes training for when I'm not there. So he's been a great guy who's brought the two clubs together. And when we play Jakarta, the best on-ground player now wins the Matt Jolly medal. So he's probably been one that's been a really instigator to bring the clubs together. And now we've got our women's team. Again, we wouldn't be able to field the team on the weekend if the Bali and Jakarta girls didn't join together. So you'd rather be joining together and playing than not joining together and not getting games in. And that was our approach.
Certainly been an excellent outcome for both clubs. And it brings the clubs, I just know off the field as well, we don't need to go into these details, as AFL Indonesia as an entity, having those two healthy relationships between those two clubs, and obviously the Bali Pakan guys, the Borneo Bears, and then you've got the, what are they called? The Batman.
The Batam Bats.
Yeah, over on the island there. So it brings everyone together. It gives you a united front when it comes to funding as well, and going into the different markets as well. So it's been a really, really positive outcome. I'm going to go into, you spoke about Jack-Ahern. We've had him on our podcast before. If anyone hasn't watched this podcast, just go into our podcast section of our AFL Asia Facebook page and go through some of our old podcasts. We've had him on a couple of times with Shuffle and Strides, and an addition on his own about his struggles and where he's at and where he's inspiring people. So for those that don't know, Jack-Ahern was an ice addict. He moved over to Bali to go to a rehab centre. He's since come out the other end. He's one of the best footballers in AFL Asia, played in all three of those Asian Champs titles. Some people spot you on the street with Jack and think that he's your younger son. Tell us how far Jack has come and your relationship with him.
Well, I used to say brother, but now they say father-son, so I must have aged in the last 2 years with his grey hair. He's come a long way. I guess he wasted his teenage years on the ice. He was a good footballer and cricketer, early teens, and he's seen a lot of his mates that he played with and against grow up and play AFL or play state cricket. So he's missed the boat on that, and he's come to Bali and got himself clean, and he's been amazing what he's done for our footy club, but also what he's done for mental health. In a couple of weeks' time, he's going to run for 24 hours. I think his target's 160 kilometres, which will be his biggest run so far. And I think next year he's going to run the island of Bali, which is about something like 450 kilometres. He's going to do that pretty much 7 marathons or something, or 10 marathons or something like that in 10 days. So he's been amazing what he's achieved over here in Bali. But what I'd love to see Jack now. He's playing against his own peers. We'd love to see how we go back home playing against guys of his age. On the weekend, we played Malaysia, and to be honest, if Malaysia had Jack, it would have been a much closer game. You know, he kicked the first 2 goals of the game out of the centre. He kicked 8 for the game. He probably dished off another 6. It's got to a point now. I'd love to see Jack ply his craft back in Australia somewhere, even if it's on a FIFO basis, and see how far he can go with his footy. Because he's got some amazing skills. He's still only 23. He captains our club, so at some point I'd like to see Jack go back and play football back home. He has just been invited into the Indonesian cricket squad as well, so he's been training with them. Yeah, so potentially I think they're playing in Japan, Gailey, later in the year. So Jack's the all-rounder that they've invited to play for the Indonesian national team.
Wow.
I have mentioned to you before, Rick would have been probably last Asian champs or at a different stage, whether he could mix it at a higher level. I reckon a good way for Jack to go is to go over to Darwin for a summer, playing that summer comp. That would give him a pretty good idea, because you get a lot of ex-AFL players play there. There is a bit of a pathway to potentially playing a southern team, whether it's in a waffle team or an SANFL team off the back of that. Opportunities are endless. But for someone of his ilk, he's got the tank. You're playing it week in, week out at a different skill level. That could be a starting point for him. I don't know. We'll see what happens down the track. But yeah, he's been an instrumental figure and an inspirational captain and leader on and off the field, and just love following his progress. And love following
we had
the big
female players. We had a female play English girl that we introduced to AFL during COVID because she was living here. A girl called Sophie Bennett, and she had to go back to England during COVID and actually kept playing football, and then represented Great Britain in the European champs. And so she's now going to move back to Bali, and she's coming to the Asian champs in Bangkok. Her flight's booked, so that's going to help our cause no end when it comes to the women's champs.
Perfect. That's going to be an injection of talent that you need, I think.
Yeah.
Now let's move along. Rick, we've spoken about local development, and you've been a real prominent figure and someone who's invested heavily in local development, whether it's just in Bali, but on a whole scale across the Asian front. And we had the wonderful opportunity of having you coach our AFL Asia Lions representative team that played in the curtain closer against the Team AFL China Dragons. They played in the curtain closer to the Port Adelaide and St Kilda last AFL game in Shanghai. As the president of AFL Asia at the time and someone who was managing the squad, it was unbelievable to work alongside you, to have a simplistic game plan. The camaraderie that you developed in just a couple of days with that squad was unbelievable. And just let us know, just some background information as to what your experience was like on that weekend.
Yeah, it was amazing to have a group of players that only just met each other, and a lot of them couldn't even speak English, to try and coach and communicate with the team when you've got an interpreter in the back of the room speaking to the Japanese boys, and that they've come from all backgrounds and all across Asia. It was a pretty amazing experience for me as well, and very challenging from a coach's point of view. And what we achieved on that weekend, and the smiles were on their faces after the game, and the excitement they had coming into the game, know they're going to be playing at a proper stadium in front of a crowd. I got so much out of that weekend, and that's what I've loved about being involved with AFL Asia, is introducing the game to new people who haven't played before, and to see their genuine excitement. And when they have a victory like that, it's almost like the biggest moment of their life. It's something they probably never thought they would achieve at that level, and it gives them so much confidence and self-esteem and faith in themselves going forward. It was a pretty amazing weekend, and just having that win over China was a really amazing experience.
Don't forget the winner chicken dinner there. He was a major part of that.
He was good. He was very good, mate. One of my prime movers for sure. How are you, mate? Good to hear from you.
Now, winner, if you've got just before we do move on, winner, if you've got 2 weeks' time, can we lock you in? I'll send you a message off there, but you're on our hit list to try and get on before the Asian Champs. We've been meaning to get you for a while, so now that you're on air, let's tie it together and get you on here.
Has he been ignoring your messages, Matty? Now he can't say he's offline. he's tripped over.
No. It's just, I think
okay.
back in June or something we got on doing. Yeah.
Fair enough. Actually, the next question I was going to ask, we've had another question come from the audience during the podcast, so I'll start with the script, and then it's been great. We've had some ripping questions come from outside, so get ready for those, Rick. But basically, the next area. So you've been in Asian footy now for 7-8 years, is it? Tell us.
I think 10. Yeah.
10 years, wow. So tell us, how much have you seen the sport grow in the region, and in particular local development, which you've already touched on a little bit. But yeah, how's the growth been in that time that you've seen?
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier. My first night at the Geckos, actually my very first night at the Geckos was in 1999, I think it was, or 1990. Yeah, 1999. I trained with the Geckos, and they had a good bunch of blokes there. They had plenty of blokes on the training field. But my first session when I moved to Bali was about 2013. As I said, we had about 5 or 6 guys, and there was no Indonesian players, and it wasn't much fun, to be honest. But I think we've been able to promote the actual club exists, and people come to Bali, whether it's to move here, short-term, long-term basis, or on holiday, and they know about us now, so they want to come down and join. And that's helped our numbers. And then pretty much what we've done as a focus, and I think Jakarta really led the way in this, is the development in the Indonesian communities. And they've been a real driver in Jakarta, and we've learned a lot from them. And we've started now to really focus on introducing more Balinese to football. We're developing our own ground up near Uluwatu, a bigger ground, because at the moment Finns is still pretty small, and we're going to lose that in the next couple of years and getting redeveloped. So we're developing our own football field. We're doing clinics in the local communities on Tuesday, Friday and Saturday, and also they come to training with us on a Wednesday. So we've got a fully fledged program now. We've had some great sponsors as well. Trade Indy and the Away Hotel in Legian have been great financial backers of that program. And we're just starting to see the benefits of it now. We're starting, as I said, the weekend, half our team was made up of Indonesian players, and they all contributed at a really high level. And we've got a lot more coming through as well. So I've seen a massive change, especially more so in Bali than Jakarta. Jakarta have also always had a lot of Indonesian boys playing, men playing, but I'm starting to see the women come through. We had about 4 in the women's team on the weekend who were Indonesian. So you've definitely seen a changing of the landscape in terms of the players we've got, and not just from Indonesian, but we've got players now from all over the world who are playing Australian football, which we can't just focus on Indonesia. We need to, broadcast it anywhere we can.
Yeah. It's great that you gave the shout out to your sponsors as well. It's quite funny. James from Trade Indy used to come through Vietnam a little bit, and we had a few cross paths through work a couple of nights out here in Saigon. And I remember always being in his ear saying, "You've got to have a kick next time you're here." And he was like, "There's no way. And he actually reached out to me when he landed in Bali and said, "You were right. I went and had a kick, and it is much more welcoming and accessible in Asia." And I'm chuffed just to see how involved he's become in footy in Indonesia. Whenever you guys through your social media and stuff, it's really inspiring.
He's been awesome. He backed the Bintangs and he backed the
Geckos.
But we got him back playing again. He got himself fit, and he's doing F45, and he trimmed up. And then he plays like he thinks he's Tony Modger when he plays. So he makes a chest mark really, like he does a somersault after he takes a chest mark, and he loves flying high in the packs. And he actually showed a bit. Then he did his ACL. We haven't seen him back playing again. He's had the last 12 months off. So hopefully we can see him make a comeback next year.
Well, hopefully he gets along to the champs anyway. I'd love to catch up.
He's just had a baby, mate, so maybe not. He just had a baby couple of weeks ago.
Righto. Yeah. Now I'm going to move on to the some of the comments that we've had through the broadcast so far today, and this one from Irwan is I think a ripper just on what we were just discussing, the growth, especially you went into how the Indonesian growth and the Balinese growth has been so inspiring. So I think firsthand, especially for some of us in other regions across Asia, what have you seen work, especially in terms of getting locals up and about with their footy, and what do you think are the sort of things that help to stick a player? You know, you get people who come along and they're sort of on the fence, and then there's got to be that key thing to getting them back week on week. Once they're there for a while, odds are, you know, they'll never leave. But what have you seen that helps to attract locals to footy?
I think one step we've had to make is going out to the communities, not expect them to come to our training ground. I think the biggest thing we've done now is we're actually now sending out coaches and footballs out into Denpasar and into Uluwatu and bringing the sport to them. And the away hotel has provided us with a car as well to be able to transport footballs and coaches, but also now they're transporting players to our Wednesday night training at Finn, so they can actually train with the expat and the Bali Geckos team. So that's probably been the biggest, what I've seen so far, the biggest traction we've had in getting Indonesians to play is going out to them. And they probably don't get, you know, walking into Finn's Rec Club, it could be quite intimidating, but going out to them in their own environment, their own sporting field. And we're also now using our own Indonesian players that have been with us for a while, like Arn and Putu, guys that have been around the club now for 4 or 5 years or even longer. We're using them as coaches. And now you can see the other Indonesians aspiring to be wanting to be them. To see 7 of our Bali guys go to Malaysia to play football, and some of them didn't even have a passport. We had to rush around getting them a passport because they've never been outside of the country. To see that the opportunities that AFL can present to them, and that's really inspiring these players to learn our game and get fitter and learn this new sport, which can really help. You know, it gives them a pathway, I guess, and we're starting to see a lot more traction now getting the local players involved. Yeah,
fantastic. And I love hearing those sort of experiences because they help, you know, everyone across the region. On a slightly more lighthearted note, but still in the Indonesian archipelago, Pol Pot Holiday from Jakarta would like to know what's with the hair and how long did it take to do?
It's funny how all the guys that give me shit about my hair, they're either bald or got really shit haircuts or gone really bad. What is with that?
Yeah, it's no coincidence.
And he's still cocking up and about because Collingwood are in the finals and a chance to make it. So that's why he's all up and about right now. But when we brought Dane Swan over to Batam to play for the Geckos, I tell you what, Paul was pretty shitty about that. Even though Swanee is one of his idols, he didn't like seeing Swanee line up against the Jakarta Bintangs.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And the final one, I think this is a ripping question before Matty gets us back to the agenda. Rook, his ears pricked up, obviously, when you mentioned that Ikanas was under your stable back in the day. Now, he would like to know if Aka was going to, let's take out the Geckos and the Volcanoes in this case. If Aka was going to come to Asia, which club do you think will fit his character the best?
Oh, well, I think the Bulldogs banned the handstand, didn't they, when he went there? So, which of the clubs, Gully, you probably know, Ben, which of the clubs would ban the handstand? Wouldn't like the individual, would it be Hong Kong, Singapore, one of those? They probably wouldn't like the individual, you know, taking the credit
Singapore
for the handstand.
On that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Matt Jolly would tolerate that at the Jakarta Bintangs. So I think his best bet's probably the Bali Geckos, I would have thought.
Yeah, fair enough. Not surprised.
We're going to change things.
It'd be hard to fit Acker and Luffy in the one forward line, though. I would have thought. Those two every
Okay, let's get back on things back on track. We're not going to go to the Tribal Sport Friendly Forum, but we're going to go to Tribal Sport AFL Final Series. Just a quick preview. Time is of the essence. Rick's got to get to footy training soon. Thursday night, the Brisbane Lions, who finished in 5th position, take on the Richmond Tigers. Brisbane have been leaking goals of late. They've had 12 players run through their defence and been decimated by injuries and suspensions of late. Richmond are the number one team with ball in hand the last 6 weeks. With Dusty Martin back, all roads lead to a sleeping giant making a statement here on Thursday night. I can't see the Lions getting even close to Richmond. I think Richmond, and saying that, the Brisbane Lions have only won 1 out of 6 finals they've appeared in this run in September over the last few years, and it was against Richmond. But Richmond did win the flag. That was when the finals were up in Brisbane. Boys, are you going with Richmond? And what's your thoughts? We'll go to you first, Rick.
I feel like I'm watching On the Couch again. I watched it last night, and I think you just pretty much said what they said with all the stats and whatever. I think you're right, mate. I'll go with Richmond on that one, especially with Dusty back.
I'll buck the trend because I just don't see Brisbane going down like this. And I think if they were to, it'll be hard for them to. They're too good to not put up a fight at home. So I don't know how, but somehow I think they pull something out this week.
Yeah, I don't think so, Bill. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Yeah. Let's move to Friday night. Bills, Melbourne Demons, who finished in second position, will take on the Sydney Swans. Sydney Swans have had an outstanding season, and they're going to keep staying in this top four for a few years to come. Loving the form of Heaney and Buddy up front, and the midfield has got plenty of depth, and they're pretty even across the field. The McCartan brothers are like the Rocket Gibraltar, but having said that, the Melbourne Demons, they've got the best midfield in the comp, and they've made a few statement games of late. This is going to be an absolute belter at the home of footy at the MCG Friday night. I'm going to go with Melbourne. Could be close. I think it could be a breakaway at the start of the last quarter and just give a few death punches to the Swans. And I'm expecting the Melbourne D's by about 3 or 4 snags. Rick?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, mate. They have made some statements in recent times. I think they found their mojo back, and I think they got too many match winners, especially in their midfield, to lose in Melbourne. So had it been in Sydney, maybe a different story. But I think being at the MCG, even though I think Swans might have beaten them their last start, but being at home in Melbourne, I'll go with the Demons.
Bill, your club, your team, what's your tip?
I'm pretty happy with you guys tipping there. I did watch them versus the Swans at the MCG earlier this year in person with Simon Highfield, a big Swans fan, and I don't know. I still feel like Melbourne's best footy gets the job done. Even that day, it did for a while, and then they just sort of faded. And I think that happens when teams are trying to go back to back. But they've got the sniff of blood now as things get serious, and I just hope they keep fronting up for a few more weeks.
Yeah, they will be right in the thick of it. Let's go to Saturday twilight game at the G. The all-conquering Geelong Cats are gearing up for the first premiership since 2011. I actually went to that game against Collingwood, and that's their opposition on the twilight game at the G. I still think, and I will stand by this, I still think Collingwood are playing above themselves. They've had a magnificent season. They've won all those tight games, and this is what it could be, but I think the Cats just got an unbelievable forward line, plenty of depth through the midfield, and if there's anyone changing stripes from Geelong to a pie, which is going to be Gary Ablett, going up to Palmerston Magpies this summer to play in the NTFL, which is brilliant that he's given some time back into that club. I think he'll actually be playing. I'm not sure if Eddie Betts plays for the same club, but this time round it's going to be all Cats, and I think they're going to do a pretty good number on Paul Halliday's Collingwood. I'm going about 6 or 7 goals here for Geelong at the G.
Mate, we need Geelong to win because I just couldn't deal with Paul Halliday week of Collingwood going to a prelim. And there's a lot of Cat supporters here at the Geckos, so I can't pick Collingwood.
I agree. Bill?
I agree. Still find it fascinating that Collingwood have taken top seed in this year's finals from 17th last year. Home final, opportunity to go straight through to a prelim. But yeah, the Cats look a class above still.
Agreed. Over to the West on the Saturday night at Optus Stadium, the Fremantle Dockers will take on the Western Bulldogs, who scraped into the finals. Their last month hitting in the finals was really good. Nate Fyfe is a big out for the Dockers, and I think it's their first finals appearance in 5 or 7 years. They really needed Fyfe, but he's been pretty injury prone all year. Andrew Brayshaw has had a tremendous season, and he will feature prominently in the Brownlow medal in a week or so's time. Now, I've got a stat for you boys. This is nothing that I've heard on radio. I actually did the research myself. There's the last time the two 7th and 8th seed both won in the final series, which was back in 2015. So it's been 7 years since this has happened. I was already going for the Bulldogs. Now that Fyfe's out, I think they win, and they win easily. Rick?
So you're going for the Bulldogs, Gaylord?
Bulldogs, yep.
Yeah, I'm a Bulldogs man. So I grew up a Bulldog, and yeah, I think they're a really big chance in Perth. I think Liver's out with a hammy, which is a big lock, so he might have taken Brayshaw. But I think Bulldogs played pretty good in Perth. They've had some decent games in the run home, so I think the Bulldogs can get over the line. Particularly if it's wet, there's a bit of rain forecast for Perth, and I think that might suit the Bulldogs.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd go with the weather. If it rains, I think Freo are in a lot of trouble. And if it's dry, I'd say Freo, because I watched them play under the roof at Marble against the Dogs a few weeks ago, and I was really disappointed with the Dogs. They just didn't seem to have a plan to get the ball back once Freo got it into that kick mark sort of game. But if it's wet, that obviously goes out the window.
Rory Lobb can't be kicking goals from the grand.
Yeah, 60-metre goals back to back to back to back.
One of those again, surely not.
Yeah, but they looked pretty comfortable in that game. And then the Giants did something similar, but they just couldn't score. And I just thought the Dogs didn't have enough of an action plan to get. They weren't ferocious enough to get the ball back. If it rains, it puts all that out the window, though. I think Liver evened this up a little bit. I felt like everything was going against Freo, the weather, Fyfe out, and then today to see that pendulum swing back the other way makes me think if the weather's okay, Freo will be okay.
Talking about tips, don't forget AFL Asia's official tipping competition is still going ahead as we speak. It doesn't stop after round 23. We've had the bye round. Make sure you put your tips in for the finals, and it will come down to AFL Grand Final day. So, Sophie, you are leading. We need to find out who you are. Bill, you're going to have to do a bit of research between now and Grand Final day. But more importantly, very, very thankful for the generous time of Rick Olarenshaw, AFL Asia royalty. He's an outstanding character and an even better bloke. And thank you very much for joining us, Rick. It's been tremendous.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I'm going to get off the footy training. I can't have the coach running late.
Beautiful. Rick, you get the 3-2 on the 1. Bill, fantastic to see you too. And looking forward to seeing you both over in Bangkok. AFL Asia 2022 Asian Champs, October 22, Saturday. Be there or be square. See you soon. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch up with you next time.